This is the Electric Bike Action Podcast, devoted to all things on two wheels, and sometimes three, with an electric motor. Electric Bike Action Magazine is a print and digital magazine that reviews bikes and shares the latest news about e-bikes. I'm Tony Donaldson, the editor of the magazine and the host of this podcast. Be sure to give us a thumbs up and, if you like, a review to help us reach more people. You can also check out our website, electricbikeaction.com, and check out our Facebook page and Instagram account. My guest today is a friend and someone I've had on the show not too long ago. It's Drew Engelmann from Yamaha Bicycles. They've announced 3 brand new bikes since I last interviewed him, including a Class 3 28 mile per hour drop bar bike called the Civante, and their first ever full suspension electric mountain bikes, the YDX-MORO and YDX-MORO Pro. The latter two feature a patent-pending frame design with a split top tube and split down tube that they call a dual twin frame, allowing some big advantages in the design. This shows that e-bikes offer bike designers a chance to make something entirely different than a traditional bicycle and think outside the diamond, as it were. Let's jump right in and talk about it with Drew.
How you been?
Good, man.
Yeah.
We haven't, it hasn't been that long since we talked, but there's a lot of exciting stuff that's come out since then.
There really is, isn't there?
Yeah.
First and foremost, rad on 4K. Holy cow, man.
Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it yet. I'm just so pumped that it's coming.
Oh, it's out.
It came out in July.
Yeah.
So it's out now,
I produced some of the special features for it.
Right. So when did it launch officially?
It was in June. I can't remember when.
It was in June. Okay. It's funny. I'm like seeing all these trailers for it. And then I actually literally like right before we got on the phone together, just looked to see if it launched yet. And it says July in the other trailers that I'm looking at. So if it's out already, I'm even more excited for today. That's awesome.
Yeah, actually, you can get it video on demand. You cannot any longer get the special edition with the special features on it. They sold out of 12,000 copies really fast. Yeah,
I can imagine. Holy cow. I mean, what other movie can a generation that is as vast as it is kind of tie everything back to what happened in that movie as an inspiration? You know, It's like, I think everybody has a rad story.
Absolutely. I run into fans of that film all the time. And the funny thing is it has the biggest disparity on Rotten Tomatoes between the critics, which gave it a 0, and the fans that give it 100%.
Welcome to the cycling industry. We don't care what anybody else thinks. We're just doing what we like.
There you go. That's
right?
Exactly the way it should be done.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, you've been a really busy guy, though. I'm following you on social, obviously, and we catch up on there. But, man, I tell you, you've had a very busy summer, haven't you?
Oh, just a little bit. And I've been playing around with some electric motorcycles.
Yeah, I saw that too. I'm sorry you had to give that back.
Yeah. Well, when's Yamaha coming out with one?
Goodness gracious. If I knew, I'd be a pretty happy camper myself.
I know you would.
Yeah. We're a smart power vehicle division in our group, you know. So we handle the power assist bicycles and power assist wheelchairs. And outside of that, I am in the dark on so many things, as much as any other consumer would be.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. But,
so, well, let's talk YDX-MORO and the commuter bike. The Civante.
Yeah, absolutely. The Civante and the YDX-MORO and YDX-MORO Pro. Let's have a chat. I'm super excited. I finally get to talk about this stuff with you.
Yeah. Tell me about the YDX-MORO and the YDX-MORO Pro, and how did that name come about? I mean, it's obviously similar to the YDX Torque, but explain the nomenclature.
Yeah, so the YDX is our prefix for the Yamaha Dirt experience. So if we were to kind of look back at the way that Yamaha typically brands products, the letters do have some sort of correlation to not necessarily always the English language, but many times it is. For this one being that the YDX-MORO and YDX-MORO Pro are specific to the U.S. Actually, the YPJ-MT is what it's called in Japan, is the Pro model that we offer here in the States, but with a different overall package. The naming of the Morrow and the Torque is definitely something, we wanted to kind of give everybody the awareness of the amount of power that the hardtail produces. We thought that the spelling of the TORC also had some cool connotations to other, off-road messages that it's kind of out there in the power sports side, but also that the Morrow for us is tied to a mountain range in Japan, and the Morrow Mountains are the Black Mountains, and the Black Mountains there are probably some of the most aggressive all mountain trails that you can ride. We've ridden them many times in testing, and we just thought it was only fitting that we would name it the YDX-MORO.
Very cool.
Absolutely.
All right, tell me about the frame.
Oh man, where do I start? I'll start with first and foremost, it's called the dual twin frame. The dual twin frame, obviously, if you haven't seen it yet, we have 2 top tubes and 2 down tubes that run the side of the rear shock mount and the rear shock itself, but also creates a skeleton cage around the battery as well, for the new, we call it a multi-position 500 watt hour lithium ion battery. And that cage design, we really were kind of trying to find ways to, after riding so many different of our competitors' bikes and even the bikes that we've created in prototype forms, we wanted to find a way to centralize the overall weight of the bike. You know, the benefits of having a center mount drive unit are kind of apparent once you get on a trail. You know, it's more balanced front and rear. It feels more natural and more intuitive to you when it's, you know, between your feet.
Sure.
And we wanted to keep that frame design to benefit that as well. So we did a really unique thing in that it is patent pending, of course. I shouldn't say of course, but it is patent pending.
Oh, the internet lit up with that.
Right. And the cool thing about it is that it really allowed us to keep the drive unit more in line with the trail. We actually angled the drive unit more vertically to decrease the bolt pattern of the drive unit mount itself. And by decreasing that mounting pattern, we also stiffened up the frame from basically the crank arm on down. And it also allowed us to tuck that battery closer to the rider as well, because the models that we rode that had a battery inside a frame completely, and the down tube looked very similar to a conventional bike down tube as far as orientation and angle. On the face of a jump or in the face of a lip of anything like that, it would just kind of stack into it a bit too much. So when we actually moved the battery further back towards the rider, it felt a lot more like a conventional bike ride, where you can pre-pump the jump and get ready to go for the lip itself. And it feels like it's more balanced underneath you versus kind of being in front of you. So that was one of the key characteristics that we were searching for, is how do we get the bike to ride like a conventional bike with the additional mass of, you know, almost a 7-pound battery in there.
Right. Wow. It's really amazing to look at too. And you, by doing all of this, you also brought the standover height down and sort of brought all of that in together. Yeah,
that was kind of the key thing is the, you know, we call it the mass centralization of weight or the centralization of mass underneath the rider. And so if you look at the geometry chart of the bike, it doesn't look like a conventional geometry in any way. And, you know, I think back of when geometry charts really became popular, when the internet was really starting to take off, and people would start measuring the geometry charts before they would even test ride a bike before deciding, you know, if they liked it or not. And I always thought that was kind of a hard thing to do, because, you know, I've looked at geometry charts of bikes that I absolutely love and wondered why the heck did that person even come close to thinking about that. But if you look at like the new Evil bikes, you know, their new geometry is beyond the realm of being progressive. And the new Ibis geometries as well, for that matter. If you look at the geometry chart, you kind of scratch your head and kind of wonder how they came up with it. But then you test ride it, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this is an awesome ride. And so we really focus on the ride characteristics more so than even looking at the geometry chart, for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, going by specs on anything, it's a number. It's a way to quantify things when you start looking at it. But until you're actually on it, you don't know what the dynamics of that ride is going to be.
Yeah, I think that just really exemplifies itself even furthermore in e-bikes too, because there are so many different things about an e-bike when we compare it to a conventional bike that you have to account for. You know, chainstays shouldn't necessarily be expected to be the same on a conventional bike to an e-bike, and vice versa. You know, the stiffness rating of an e-bike frame, if you had that on a conventional bike, holy cow! I mean, you'd be able to roll over dimes and tell if they're heads or tails. I mean, these frames are designed with so much more strength in mind. Like the testing we do is very similar to what you would see for a motocross bike. And the fact that, we even do drop tests for frames with the suspension loaded and locked, again, being from the bike world my whole life, I've never seen such a stringent amount of testing done to a frame before, and where they actually expected it to pass. That was the thing for me to really kind of look at that going, wow, I don't know how this is going to work. And sure enough, we came out with some really great designs that not only passed testing, but exceeded it. So really excited.
Very cool. I mean, it just keeps pushing it and making it better all the way across.
Absolutely. Yeah, it does. It does.
All right. So when are those going to be available?
So we're looking to have the bikes in the market by the end of this month. We do have some COVID situations that are getting in our way that might push it into the first part of September. But they should be hitting the market by the end of the month.
Okay, excellent. And then you'll have more information soon on what the bike's spec'd with and pricing and all that stuff then.
Yeah, we'll be updating our website with the new images soon. Right now, we're inviting people to come to our YamahaBicycles.com/future-ebikes. I said that wrong last time we talked, but the future-ebikes is our page where you'll see the new prototype shown there. But the ones you're seeing in the media today, those are actually going to be the production models. And the future-ebikes page is also where people can go to enter for a chance to win one of any of the bikes that we create. And that sweepstakes is actually ending fairly soon. So if you've got listeners or if your subscribers are checking this out, definitely go check out the site, enter to win, because that entry timeline is going to be ending soon.
Okay. Do you happen to know the date on that?
I believe the legalese on that says August 31st.
Okay. I'll make sure I put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
So very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Let's talk Civante.
Civante is a fun ride. Holy cow. That thing, we did so much programming to that drive unit. It took us a year and 2 months for us to finally all agree on it as riders in the office of what performance characteristics we liked the most, that we wanted to keep that natural and smooth feel out of that programming that we have from the PW Series SE for the Urban Rush and the other bikes. But again, we ride so many of our bikes and so many of our competitors' bikes that we wanted to make sure that we weren't just kind of designing a feel within a bubble. And that really kind of, for us at least, when we're doing the testing, the thing that we recognize the most across most every class 3 pedal assist bike was that between 22 to 24 miles an hour, which is definitely a very big range when you're talking about programming, it became really, really vague as to what the drive unit was going to be doing underneath you, whether it was actually going to be assisting you up to 28 or if it was being assisting you while you were on your way, kind of meandering around that 24 to 25. And between 22 and 24 miles an hour, it seems like a lot of the drive units out there have a hard time deciding if it's going to help propel you or if it's going to match what you're going to do based upon the amount of wattage it can put out. So we did change the way in which the assist modes kind of work. And our biggest thing is that we wanted to make sure that anybody that can pedal at 100 RPMs would be able to get the bike to 28 miles an hour in any gear.
Okay.
And that's really a difficult thing to do. And that's actually what took us the longest amount of time, especially when you're deciding what cassette to use. Because as you know, if you change a cassette on a wheel that was designed to work in unison with the drive unit, it changes the characteristics of it dramatically. So if you take a 1225 cassette for a road bike and you decide to put a 1232 on it, that drive unit is not going to perform nearly the same as what it did before. The big jumps between gears have such a dramatic difference in the amount of power that the rider puts out. And when you measure that with cadence and rolling speed of the bike, it makes it feel totally different. So I highly encourage people to stay with the same cassette and the same tire size that they start out with, because anything beyond those or below those will just make the bike handle different than what the brand intended for. And for us, again, kind of going back to that kind of vague time, when we did test ride it with a 32 and even a 36 tooth lowest gear on the cassette, it didn't have the ability to get people to that 28 mile an hour assist at that 100 RPMs. And 100 RPMs for us is kind of like the max that people can probably sustain on a regular basis. And it might be even on, kind of the high side, as most people kind of pedal between 78 to 85. So we wanted to make sure that, if you're putting the effort in, you're going to get the effort back. and that's a pretty difficult thing to do for Class 3.
Well, I'm excited to ride it, and you did remind me of something else with the YDX-MORO. You've added an extra sensor to that.
We did. Yeah, the angle sensor or the inclinometer, depending upon who you're talking to. So the angle sensor. So we did two things. So one, we added an MTB mode.
Yes.
We also added the automatic mode, which is where the angle sensor comes into play. So the angle sensor measures obviously the slope either up or down of where the drive unit is oriented in relation to level. And with automatic mode, you can push and hold the up arrow button for 1 second, and you'll go from your standardized manual switch adjustments like you would have for Eco and Standard and High and EXPW. If you push and hold that up arrow button, it switches over to a sub computer where it will now have an automatic rotation through those assist levels from Eco to Standard to High. Those are the only three that it has in the automatic mode, but based upon slope and all the other three sensors of the power that the rider's putting out, their cadence of their feet, and also the rolling speed of the rear wheel. And being that our speed sensor is built into our rear hub and is not a spoke magnet, we can tell very, very quickly what kind of movements that automatic mode needs to have happen. The reason why the angle sensor is so important for that measurement is that if you are going uphill versus downhill, the assist modes switching between the two or three is not always a natural feel if you don't know if the bike is going up or down. So if you're going downhill and someone's starting to really ramp up their pedal stroke and putting out a lot more power, you want that progression from the Eco to the Standard to the High to be more gradual. So it's not just a big thump of additional power every single time you put down a pedal stroke. So we changed the way and the amount of time that it takes to move from Eco to Standard and from Standard to High based upon that slope. So if you're starting out on an incline and you're not going anywhere, say you came to a stop and you want to get back on the bike and start rolling again, it will have a different power output than if you're starting out on a downhill. It'll actually start out in High versus starting out in Eco for you based upon that slope.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
Very cool. That makes a lot of sense. And is it a stepped difference between Eco, middle, and High, or is it sort of glissando where it's somewhere in that range?
It's the same settings as far as the power assist as the manual modes. So it goes from 50% to 170% for Standard now, and then from 170 to 290.
Okay.
So it's a pretty big jump between those. But because we do that digital progression in and out of the assist modes, it's a seamless transition. I mean, every single time I ride it, I'm just amazed at what the programmers were able to do so that it doesn't feel like you're either getting a whole bunch of push out of the drive unit when you weren't expecting it, without actually recognizing what was happening underneath you. So it's a really cool sensation.
I really like that, and I like the fact that you separated that out from being able to manually control all of those. There's EMTB mode from Bosch that replaces one of their settings, so you don't get a chance to automatically pick that, or I mean, not automatically. You don't get a chance to pick that manually, and so I think it's really smart the way you guys have it set up.
Thanks. Yeah, we're really liking the way it rides. Basically, I would say that's probably the number one thing that slows down our release of product more than anything else is the amount of time that it takes for us to all agree upon the performance of the drive unit in alignment with the frame characteristics. Because if you look at the way that we design drive units, even for our OEM partners, it's specific to that brand. There's no crossover. There's Giant and High Bike and BH, the way that their Yamaha drive units perform is completely different from ours and completely different from one another. And that's one of the unique characteristics about our brand as a whole is that even though we're not making bikes for Giant and we're not making bikes for High Bike or making bikes for BH, those bicycle designers have the ability to speak with our drive unit designers and let each other know kind of, hey, this is the way we want this drive unit to perform for this bike. And of course, we have some good secret sauce for ourselves too.
You do, and I've seen some of those go wrong. I remember riding one of the pre-production Giants with the PWX, and they had turned up the power so much and the torque so much on every level that even an eco on a hill, I couldn't climb the hill without spinning the back tire. Oh. And so I had a little discussion with them, and they dialed it back by the time the production units came out.
Sure. Yeah. And that's one of the great things about it is that, working in conjunction with us, we can make those changes at the factory pretty fast. But, I do get the question pretty frequently through our website on the contact us portion of it when people ask, how do I reprogram my existing system to perform a different way? And we just don't do that. That's one of the benefits of not having an off-the-shelf type of drive unit is that it is customly designed for each frame it's put on. So we don't change programming once the drive unit is created for that frame.
Yeah, and there's an interesting thing, and this is just for the nerdier people, but it fascinates me why you guys chose to allow assist support up to 170 RPM on EXPW. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, so the RPMs of a cadence, again, like I said before, the average rider is going to go between 75 and 85 RPMs for their feet. The cadence support is not necessarily thought of as a continual measured rotation of the feet, over the course of a minute. That's not what we look at it as. We look at it as what's the foot speed? How much speed is being generated by the foot in addition to the power that's being put out by that foot. And if you think about those times when you're, again, stopped on a hill, on an incline, and you're getting back on the bike and you've got that one pedal high and the other pedal low, and you're timing it, right? You're trying to push that pedal down, getting your other foot on, and then you're up and going. Well, in all actuality, that first half of a pedal stroke, and a lot of times measures well over 150 RPMs as far as speed goes. And what you don't want to have happen in that situation is you don't want to have the drive unit go to sleep in that one pedal stroke, because by the time you get your other foot on, the drive unit hasn't even woken up. And if you have a sensor with a spoke magnet, there's no chance for that rear wheel to get a full rotation in that time frame. Right. So there's no way for that speed sensor to kind of kick in and tell the drive unit, what's going on. So again, being that we have a little bit of secret sauce, we put the speed sensor in the rear hub, so it's always recording. There's never a time when it's not. So we always get compared to millions of times per second or thousands of times per second. And, I always make the kitschy joke of, well, that's great if it's ever not working, but our system's always working. It's always on. It's always recording what's going on in that rear wheel because that speed sensor is in the rear hub. So the difference being is that when you are, at least with regards to the 170 RPMs, it really shows itself on those higher output modes. So if you're looking at high or our new MTB mode or EXPW mode, that 170 RPMs really means the most. So if you're starting out from a stop, or if you're in those tight sections where you're doing a hairpin switchback turn up a hill, the last thing you want to do is have your drive unit go to sleep right before you start coasting into the corner and get ready for your turn. If you have it go to sleep, as soon as it wakes up, it tries to overcompensate, and then it will push you to the outside of the corner in the middle of your switchback. And we all know that the corners of the switchback and outside are never a fun thing to ride into.
No.
So the RPMs, albeit, it sounds like we're anticipating someone spinning up, like Peter Sagan or some other, Tour de France level cyclist, but even those guys will, top out at 140. So it really is a foot speed or a pedal speed, not necessarily the RPMs of sustained, pedaling, things like that.
Okay. And that also gives you a better sort of power level at normal cadence or like doesn't it give you an advantage at 100 RPM?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it actually has really just kind of increases the sensitivity of it. So it doesn't allow for the drive unit to constantly wonder if you are pedaling or not. If you have that much sensitivity in the crank arm into the drive unit, into the cadence sensor, essentially what that does is it turns it into a digital interface versus the analog measuring of a tick, 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 tick. So it does make it a lot more smooth, especially when transitioning from one mode to another.
Okay. Very cool. Well, I wanted to keep this one a fairly short one. I know you've got time constraints as well, but thank you very much for going through this. And we're going to be doing a lot of coverage of the Civante and the YDX-MORO and MORO Pro in coming issues.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear what the subscribers say when they get to go for a test ride. We are rolling out our factory demo tour next year. We intended to launch it at Outer Bike this year, but as we all know, Outer Bike's no longer happening this season. We actually intended initially, of course, to launch it with Sea Otter. So being that we're all restricted in travel, we look forward to seeing everybody on those demos early next year. But definitely go check out one of the dealers and get on one of these bikes, go take it for a spin, because they're different. They're very different.
I cannot wait to get my grubby little mitts on one.
All right, Tony. Really good talking with you. Thanks for making the time, and looking forward to watching ride sometime really quickly too.
All right. Well, maybe one of these days we can do it together. I've got a couple of copies myself.
Awesome. I'd love that.
So, all right, man. Well, thank you very much, Drew, and I will talk to you soon.
Great, Tony. Have a great day.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thanks. You too. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Electric Bike Action Podcast. For the latest reviews and information, visit electricbikeaction.com, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Stitcher or Google or wherever you get your podcasts, and give us a rating and review to help spread the word about e-bikes. You can also email me at tonyd@hightorque.com. That's TONYD at hi-torque.com. I'm happy to answer questions and would love to hear your experiences and adventures on e-bikes. This podcast is powered by Callcast.